This Week in Politics. Today we're going to take a look at the Obama legacy. Now I'm just going to hit on some of the big ones, but those have been done to death, and I'm not going to spend much time concentrating on them. One of the things that I have noticed since this whole Trump-Russia thing has been perpetuated on the American people. What do you think about something? They have had the entire Democratic Party plus operatives throughout the world trying to find anything on Trump. I couldn't undergo that kind of scrutiny, could you? And yet, in spite of it all, they found nothing. He's squeaky clean, which is amazing when you consider the president we just had. It kind of reminds me of when Gerald Ford took over for Nixon. Gerald Ford was squeaky clean, and that's what the country needs at the time. And I think that's exactly what happened with Trump. Trump is exactly what this country needed, and the Democrats hated it. So when I was thinking about how squeaky clean Trump has turned out to be, which I thought they'd find all kinds of stuff on, considering the lifestyle he led, or I imagine he led, squeaky clean. So then I compared and contrast that with the Obama administration. And it occurred to me, I don't think there's been a bigger switch in legacy in my lifetime from one president to the next. So I started making a list. When I get down there, and I'm going to go through each of these, it's going to be rather comprehensive, so I wouldn't be surprised if this program goes a little long. And I want you to think about the damage that has been done to this government, to the office of the president, and to the American people's expectation of what we should expect from our leaders. I mean, even as Trump is in the White House, the Democratic leaders in the House and the Senate are showing who exactly they are. That's one of the things that Trump has done. He has been a disruptor for sure, and that's what we needed and wanted. But not only is he disrupting, he's exposing, and really not by anything that he's doing. He's just doing the job we elected him to do. And because he is so successful, the Democrats are showing who they are and what they're made of. And it really shouldn't be surprising when you consider the sewer that this country has been in for the previous 8 years before Trump walked in. Now, the first one I want to talk about is Benghazi. We all know that Clinton is responsible, and if for none other of her crimes, she should be in prison for that one. She was the reason that guy got killed. She was the reason for the lies and the cover up afterwards. And it was all because an election was coming up, and they couldn't have that stain going into an election. And then once they were in for a penny, they were in for a pound, and the lies became more lies and buried. Now, had Trump lost the election and Hillary won, we would never have known about Benghazi. The Democrats would have never said anything. It would have been buried. And the media wouldn't have played any of the hearings and the committees, and it would have just gone away. But because Trump was elected and shined light on it, we now know most of the truth. Why nothing's been done is probably because the DOJ, the FBI, and the CIA are still being run by Obama operatives. Number two, the Lois Lerner escapade in Ohio. This is the IRS agent who was slow tracking conservative and Christian and right-wing applications for tax exempt numbers. We know for a fact she was in charge and approved the actions she was doing from the IRS office in Washington. We know that to be a fact. We know for a fact that there was emails going back and forth between her and the White House. We know that to be a fact. We don't know the content of those, but we know it was going back and forth. Now, I want you to ask yourself this question. How many field operatives throughout the country do you know that run an office, send emails back and forth to the president? And yet, we know this happened. Now, let me tell you what happened to the Lois Lerner thing. She got caught. She admitted it. The office first, the FBI lost all of the emails again. Then, when they were pushed by the House investigation, they found some of them. They lost all the ones to the White House, but they found some of them. So the investigative Congress invited her, subpoenaed her to come and testify. She went in, made an opening statement, and took the Fifth Amendment all the way through. Now, based on the rules, you can take the Fifth, but you can't say one word from beginning to end. If you answer one question, if you say one thing, then you can't take the Fifth. If you do, you are held in contempt and put into jail. Lois Lerner gave her opening statement and then took the Fifth. She is in contempt. They held her in contempt, and guess what? She never went to prison. She stayed in office. Then quietly, she retired. She is still in contempt today. But she retired, kept her benefits, and nobody has bothered her. Now, who in the world do you think has enough juice to make that happen? Absolutely weaponized the IRS. And then when it was caught, they all closed ranks to cover it up. Another cover up. When Obama bailed out some of the businesses around the country, the word was bailout. Remember? And everybody said, "Where's my bailout?" It was not a bailout. It was a buyout with an option to repurchase. Let me give you an example. Chrysler Corporation received their bailout, and in exchange, the federal government got X amount of stock, seats on the board. Now, you take that times all of the bailouts they did. In addition to that, Obama had hundreds of czars, TSARS, czars, that did not have to be approved by anybody. They reported directly to the president, and each one of them was assigned to a business, and they had the authority from the president to dictate salaries, bonuses, advancements, who was on the board, and every view of the business. Now, compare that to the time when Lee Iacocca, who was with Chrysler at the time, went to the United States government and got a loan. He got a loan. And then when he went back and pulled the company out, for that 2 years until the loan was paid off, every person on the board of directors took a salary of $1 a year until that company was bailed out. And they paid the loan off early and with interest. That's a loan. That's helping U.S. government. What Obama did was socialized our major businesses, our banking industry, our insurance industry, our car industry, and the big bankers on Wall Street. That is for a socialist, that's a coup. Now, AIG took the Obama administration to court, and it is in court as we speak. And they took them to court based on the gun to the head. You know, if you want the money, then you're going to let us take over. Now, there's no question that it was a hostile takeover. The federal government used their money and their power to take over American businesses. It was no bailout, and the press is fully complicit in this. It is not; they were not bailouts. A bailout is where you give them money to help them pull themselves out. A loan is where you give them money and they have a promise to pay it back in a certain amount of time. Okay, that's two. Then the buyout is where you buy such a large amount of stock that you control everything, and you only give them the money if they allow you that total access. That's like signing a check with a gun to your head. I remember that in one of those bailout bills, the Democratic Congress put in a slush fund of $1 billion to be set aside for the president to spend as he saw fit. And I know that was just in one of them. There was several bailout packages that went through. I don't know if each one of them had one, but I know this particular one did. I've never heard any accounting. I don't know where the money went. I have my suspicions, but there's been no accountability. Nobody found any $1 billion sitting around. If it was spent, we have no idea what it was spent on, when it was spent, but I know that that was made. So there's $1 billion floating around somewhere that had Obama as the only person that could use it, and he could use it as at his disposal. Does that mean when he retires, he can take, when he left the office, he took what was left of that $1 billion and bought himself a home? Is that what it means? Maybe that $1 billion is being used right now to finance the shadow government that he's perpetuating a mile down the road from the White House. I don't know, but I know there's hanky panky with the money. Another thing that was part of the Obama legacy, and I remember thinking this all the way through his administration, and I did not find this out until just in the last couple of months. But I remember thinking, boy, the Department of Justice, the FCC, the IRS, everybody is taking these businesses to court and fining them millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you remember that? I mean, it would be like they took this bank to business or to court for that. They took this publishing company for that. It seemed like once a month they were getting a huge fine from somebody. Well, guess what? Those fines are supposed to go to the general treasury. Okay? None of them did. They all went into a special account that was used to fund left-wing groups, most of which were controlled by George Soros. Press didn't tell you that, but that's a fact. Like Black Lives Matters, the Wall Street Group, those fines in the first place were misappropriated. They were not supposed to go into any special account. They were supposed to go to the general treasury towards the debt. They did not. That's misappropriation of funds. Then to give them to strictly left-wing liberal organizations, and specifically to mostly George Soros, is so wrong on every level. I can't even believe nobody went to jail over that. Number 6, while Obama was in office, he wanted to turn the entire government liberal and Democrat so that it could not be changed if a Republican came back into office. So here's what he did. He went through the White House, the FBI, the CIA, Justice, the IRS, the EPA, and those are the ones I know of, and probably the rest of the government as well. And he told his leaders, first, reorganize and eliminate as many positions as you can. Then, for those few that we can appoint, let's do that. And then the majority of the rest of them, I want to turn those into civil servant positions and then hire left-wingers to take those spots. Why civil servants? Because they can't be fired. That's why there's so many leaks coming out, or one of the reasons. Because everybody in there is that used to be appointed, that the presidents used to have an opportunity to bring their own people in, now they can't. They are permanent employees of the federal government. First time that's ever happened. That is a complete turnaround from the way the forefathers had it set. After a new administration would come in back in the 1800s, people from around the country would come in, and within a certain set period, they would line up every day outside the president's office, and they would hand him letters of recommendation or things of their qualifications, looking for a government job. And every job was patronage. And that's how the government functioned. And it was all done within a certain amount of time. It was very orderly, but the president had the complete run of the government. Now, the president has very little at all to do with the running of the government, and that's called the deep state. He weaponized the Attorney General office. The Attorney General, who was Eric Holder for the majority of the time, was an absolute ideologue left-wing socialist. He was anti-white, anti-police, anti-justice. He was and is pro-black, so that when Black Lives Matters, when the groups went in, here's what the Attorney General did. First off, he would go to the black victims. He never went to one of the cops that got killed. He never went to one of those, even if, especially if they were white. Never went to one of their funerals, but he went to the black kids' funerals. Then he would send his office in to that police department, as an example, let's say St. Louis, and they would find all kinds of faults, and they would use the Attorney General's office to extract, first, to get rid of any whites that they could, then to lay blame and use the civil rights rules as they interpret them to fire people, move people, and make hiring blacks a top priority instead of the most qualified. He totally weaponized the Attorney General's office. That is absolutely disgusting. Another, and instead of race relations, another one he did was pot. Obama instructed the Attorney General and the Attorney General instructed police officers around the country and judges not to arrest for X amount of pot, not to issue tickets for up to a certain amount of pot. And for those that were in jail because of pot-related things, they would have to have suspended sentences or reduced sentences. Now, who do you think in the entire prison population, the vast majority are minorities? So, if they're going to cut sentences off of people in prison for pot, who do you think the main recipients of those are going to be? Blacks. Now, I haven't seen any research done, but of all of the people that were released when Holder was in office, I'd like to see a breakdown of the percentage of black and whites that were done. I guarantee you 90% of them were black. And when you consider that they probably make up 50, I would guess 50% of the prison population, uh, that, again, that office was used to benefit blacks and blacks only. Number 8, we were lied to by the Obama administration about the Iran nuclear agreement. First off, it was not a treaty, it was not a deal, it was nothing, because first off, Iran didn't sign it. If you don't sign it, there is no agreement. It was never approved by the House or the Senate in the United States. The only people that approved it, and they did it before our country's leaders even got the papers. The Obama administration rushed that paper over to the United Nations. They got it, gave it to all of the countries. They read it and voted on it and passed it unanimously in one day. How did he lie to us? Well, let me just mention a couple. The Trump organization, the Trump administration, has pointed some of these out. But let me run through the list. We were told that we had 24-hour or 24/7 access to inspect. Remember? That was a lie. There was only certain places we could go, and it had to be with a 30-day notice. We couldn't go to any military bases. It had to be approved by the UN. Uh, the hoops that they set up were so rigorous, we would never have gotten in there. We've been there. Obama's been gone for a year and a half. We've had that agreement for a couple of years. Never, and we know they broke it, and we've never been in to inspect because it's impossible to. We were told that if they violated, the sanctions would act like rubber bands and bounce right into effect. Well, that didn't happen. In fact, Trump handled it, I thought, very well. He told all the countries involved and Iran, and he gave them 90 days to wrap up business before he reimposed sanctions. Now, the sanctions he reimposed are much stricter because they are secondary sanctions, which means not only are they against Iran, but any business or country caught breaking them, they would also be banned from the international monetary market, and that would basically spell the doom of their organization. So, at just about every juncture of that agreement that they made, what we were lied to. So why did Obama make that agreement if we got nothing out of it? He wanted to help Islam and hurt Israel. That was his. In case you don't know that, that is and was the Obama administration's goal throughout his presidency. So if you want to hurt Israel and help Islam or the Middle East, what would you do? Iran was suffering. We had $100 billion of theirs frozen. They couldn't touch it. So when this agreement happened, now the logical thing to have done, if this was truly an agreement, was you would say, okay, we got $100 billion, and this is a 10-year agreement. So at the end of the first year, if you're in compliance, we'll give you $10 billion. At the end of year 2, if you're still in compliance, we'll release another $10 billion, and you do that through the 10 years. That's how it happened. The day that agreement was agreed on by the United Nations, not by the US, and by the EU. Every sanction was lifted. They got $100 billion back, and that wasn't all of it. As a parting shot and a thumb in the eye to the American people, as Obama was leaving the office, we know for a fact that he sent $1.3 billion in cash on pilots in privately chartered airplanes to Iran. That was money from our treasury. 1.3 billion in cash, in addition to the 100 billion of their money that we had. And we got nothing from the agreement. That was a total scam. It was all based on lies, deception, smoke and mirrors. We got the shaft, and they got all the cash. They got all the sanctions lifted. They've had 2 years to rebuild their military and to sponsor more terrorism throughout the Middle East. That is the Obama legacy in the Middle East. Number 9. Now, and I just got done talking about this, but this is really important, so I want to set this as its own issue here. He gave power to the UN with regard to the Iran deal. Why is that significant? The goal of the United Nations, and this can be backed up with papers. I've done shows on this before. The goal of the United Nations is to take over the United States without firing a shot. And they're making very good progress. But this was a major step for the United Nations done by Obama. Now, when he took that agreement to the United Nations, why do you think the United Nations passed that unanimously? Because they wanted to show unity. They're acting as one. Everyone in the United Nations has the same goal. They want to take over the government of the United States, and Obama handed it to them. Let's say we stayed in that agreement and we decided that we wanted to go inspect. If Obama had not given that to the United States and it was truly an up and up agreement, we would just pack up our inspectors, 10 airplanes, 10 staffs, all the equipment we needed, and we go fly into Iran and land where we pleased and go look. Well, that's not what happened. Because he gave it to the United Nations first, and because they agreed unanimously, now if we want to do anything, we would have had to go through the United Nations. It would have to be talked about, then voted on, and then if it was approved, which it never would have been, but if it was approved, then they would contact Iran and they would make up agreements. Now, and then they would set up a time and they would set up an itinerary and they put up where they're going to look. And by the time this all gets done, it's 6 months later, and they've moved everything to military bases, which we weren't allowed to inspect anyway, based on that agreement. We did not have total access. They could do anything they wanted on their military bases, and we had no access to go in there and check. So guess what? If I'm going to build nuclear weapons and the people can't come to my military bases, guess where I'm going to start doing it? I'm going to do it on a military basis, of course. But the United Nations had the last word, and they had the controlling power. And that was a very dangerous precedent to set. That's part of the Obama legacy. Now, the mainstream media has not been covering this, but for those of you that do know, we know that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton used the federal government to sell, I said sell, 20% of the United States uranium to Vladimir Putin and the Russians. And again, I've done programs on this. You can go back and check the specifics. But most people that are reporting on that leave it right there, but that's not where it ends. Clinton had to give her committee's approval, and she had enough stooges on that committee that she controlled what went through that committee. They passed it. That doesn't mean the deal is final. It had to get that approval, But once it got that approval, guess who had to sign off on it? Obama. Obama had to sign off and approve that deal. And what he did was treasonous. Him and Clinton are guilty of treason. And when you hear that and you think, well, all they did was sell uranium. Well, uranium is a critical component needed to make nuclear weapons. What if I said they sold 20% of our Air Force to the Russians? Would that be treason? What if I said they gave 20% of our nuclear weapons to the Russians? Would that be treason? Remember, the Rosenbergs, that were a husband and wife, were accused of treason for giving just the secrets to the Russians. These guys did more than give secrets. They gave physical military grade weapons and weapon materiel to our enemy. By any stretch of the imagination, that's treason. And they are equally guilty. Obama is equally as guilty as Clinton. And my guess is at some point in the future, it may be after Obama's dead, but they're going to find a pool of cash that made its way from Putin to Obama. Or they used Hillary as the go-between and made sure that it was a donation to Obama's organization somewhere. But there's a pile of cash that he's using, I promise. I know that. I just know. Number 11. To my knowledge, this has never been done before, but when Obama left the White House, he moved 1 mile down Pennsylvania Avenue where he had and still has a residence there. Him and his husband and his ex-attorney general, and it was a female at the end. I can't think of her name. They all moved in there, and everybody wondered at the time, what are they doing? Well, now we know. Because of all of the people, remember when he reorganized all those organizations, those people all owe their allegiance and their jobs to their God with a small g, Obama. So from that vantage point, and with all the cash that's missing, I'm sure there's state-of-the-art electronics, surveillance systems, communication systems, all coming from that location. So Obama is running a shadow government in exile from a mile down the White House, from the White House. Again, I consider that to be treason. If you are engaging in a day-to-day operation, planning, organizing, mobilizing, communicating, advertising for the overthrow of a duly elected president, I call that treason. And that's what they are doing. And it's a coordinated effort from inside the government and outside the government. And Obama is the one in charge. He's using the DOJ, FBI, CIA, the deep state, and people from around the country to disrupt and try to cause enough mayhem so that they can overthrow or get rid of Obama or get rid of Trump. The resistance group that he has set up is treasonous. And you got to ask yourself, how is he funding that? Is that where the $1 billion went? Or did he have several billion? Or is George Soros paying it? Because Obama, there's no way Obama should have enough money to do that. If you go back and look at his tax returns that he filed when he went into office, and he was 8 years later, even if he got the big book deal, $50 million, you can't run a nationwide resistance with that kind of money. Somebody's funding it. He's getting the money from somewhere. And that's probably a whole nother issue we don't know about yet. And the mainstream media is not going to ever uncover that. He used the FBI to cover Clinton. We know for a fact that the FBI, that Obama used the FBI to unmask people in the Trump administration before and after they took office. We know for a fact the Obama administration used the court system and the FBI and operatives from outside the country to spy on and to set up the incoming administration. Those are facts. We know that he used the FBI to cover up the Clinton email scandal. And the FBI helped to cover up the Benghazi scandal. The FBI we know this to be a fact, by the way, the FBI, then led by Comey, and before the deal was struck, they had knowledge of, because of spies they had implanted in the organization that Putin bought to get the 20% uranium. The FBI knew all about it, and they kept their mouth shut. Had they come out and said what they knew about the bribery, that deal would never have been passed. It couldn't have been passed. But because they kept their mouth shut on orders from Obama, that deal went through. He has weaponized the FBI, and we know it to be a fact on 3 different instances at least. And we're finding out more and more. It appears now, as I do this recording, that the big news last week was the FBI set up even before the Trump administration took office, set up 2 or 3 people within the Trump administration, all to get a special counsel and to make it appear that things happened when they didn't really. And again, I've done a program on that. You can go back and check it. But we know this to be a fact, and it came out this week based on, and the only way we're finding this stuff out is because one of the operatives they used was an ex-MI6 agent that is in court and is testifying in England. He used the IRS to intimidate churches and conservative groups. Remember when we talked about the Lois Lerner thing? Another thing he did when he used the IRS is just before the election of 12. Just before the election of 2012, the IRS sent a letter on the instruction of Obama to every church in the country. And that said, if you talk about politics or endorse a candidate from the pulpit, we will pull your 501c3 certificate, which is a tax exemption. Technically, he could do that. But to use the power and the strength of the IRS to intimidate and to scare pastors to not talk about endorsing a candidate. So what he's doing is he's controlling free speech. Think about that for a minute. Because he wanted to be elected to office, he was intimidating these churches to get rid of free speech. How is that even legal? But he did it. And the press reported on it, and there was, but not a lot. I mean, they stated it as a fact and moved on down the road, and probably did some op-ed pieces about, separation of church and state, which is just a crock. I could do a whole program on that. In fact, I have. But that's not what it was. He's controlling because he feared that if Christian churches stood up and said, we cannot vote for Obama because he brought gay marriage, to our country because he's pro-abortion. I mean, there's a ton of reasons but he didn't want free speech to happen in our churches. Unbelievable. That's the Obama legacy. Number 14, he used money that we give to governments around the world, and I can't remember what it's called, but every year we send money to nations around the world to help with the poor and the hungry and AIDS and just all kinds of things. Now, we all know that there's corruption in those organizations. We all know that very little of that money makes it to the people, but what it does do is it does buy us some goodwill in some instances and cooperation when we need it. What Obama did is he weaponized that. When gay marriage passed in the United States, and again, we know this to be a fact, he went to quite a few African countries and he told them, now remember, a lot of the African countries in the South anyway are Christian. And he went to them and he said, if you don't change your laws to make gay marriage and gay things legal, we're going to pull your money. First off, he did not do that to any of the Muslim countries, okay? He did it only to the Christian countries. And most of them tried to get it changed. One of them told him no. And I believe it was Uganda, but I won't swear to that. In fact, the president of that country made a huge press conference out of it and said, we are Christian, we're proud to be Christian, and we're not going to be intimidated by anybody or any amount of money. Obama kept the money. He weaponized things that we were doing for goodwill. He used it as a weapon to push an anti-God agenda. That's the Obama legacy. Fast and Furious. Now, again, I've done shows on this. You can go back and check the details. But he used the federal government. His version of the thing is they allowed guns to go down to South America because they wanted to track who was getting them. That was a lie. We were sending guns to leftist groups in Central and South America, and in exchange, they were shipping drugs back to this country. Now, again, we know this to be a fact. The drugs were coming in a little town in Arkansas. I believe it was called Medina, a little abandoned airport. Clinton was in on it. His brother was in on it. They would take the drugs. They would sell the drugs. They would take the money and launder it through the Arkansas government down there, and then turn around and make loans that were never going to be paid back to all the people involved. We know this to be a fact. The only reason that they did not prosecute is because the Clintons were elected to the presidency before they could get enough evidence to prosecute. They have the evidence. They've got all they need. But Obama was involved in that, and he kept it going. He weaponized the education department. In this country, our education from K through 12 is supposed to be local. The only thing the federal government is supposed to do is to make sure that the standards that each school district has meets certain requirements. The federal government is not supposed to talk about curriculum and force things to be done from a national level. Obama, now again, if you've read Karl Marx's manifesto, you know that one of the ways to take over a country, which he's gone down a checklist, and one of them is to take over the education. Even Hitler said it. Give me the textbooks and I will take over the country in a generation. So Obama took over the education system nationwide by using a program called Common Core. He bribed states. He bullied states. He lied to the American people. He lied to each state government. He said they had, there was just one lie after another. What it was a nationwide takeover of the education system in this country. And the purpose of it was to dumb down our kids. That was the Obama legacy. On the day that gay marriage was being discussed in the United States Supreme Court, there was a picture of Obama standing on the steps of the Supreme Court, bad-mouthing Justice Kennedy, I believe it was, because he was considered to be the swing vote. And, saying, and I don't remember exactly the verbiage, but saying things like, he has to do this, and it would be un-American, and against this and against that, using the bully pulpit to intimidate a justice of the Supreme Court to get an anti-God agenda through. It passed by one vote. Now, if you endorse homosexual marriage and homosexual rights, good for you. But for the majority of Americans, the majority of states, when I say the majority, I mean 80% of the states in this country had a homosexuality as illegal. Homosexual marriage was illegal. And by that one vote for the Supreme Court, it became the law of the land, and all of the majority of the states were ignored. That's the Obama legacy. Number 18. When Hillary was running for president and Obama was preparing to leave, everybody thought that she was going to win in a landslide. All the way up till election night, all the liberals and Democrats were sure that she was going to win in a landslide. So there was a lot of things that were not done or were done differently than if they knew a Republican was coming in. One of the things that was not done was this. They, in the Obama administration, all knew about collusion between the Democrat, the Clintons, and the Russians. Remember the 20% of uranium deal? There was the speaking fees to Bill Clinton. There was the bribery going on within the government to get this deal passed. There was all kinds of collusion going on. And when it came to the election, now, first off, I want to say that every country tries to influence elections in other countries, and most of the time they're not very effective. As an example, when Netanyahu ran for election while Obama was in office, Obama openly sent a group of his people into Israel with money and people to try to get Netanyahu out of office. They failed, but the United States did meddle in the Israeli election openly, and everybody knew about it. It was even reported in the press. So when you say that somebody meddled in an election, that's done every day. And the Obamas knew about it, but they didn't want to say anything because they didn't want to taint the election if Hillary won, when Hillary won. So they kept it quiet. So right after Trump was elected, then all of a sudden Obama broke the silence and blamed everything on Trump and collusion with the Russians. Now, what did we find? We found so far that the Russians did set up some accounts on Facebook, maybe 1,000 accounts. and they probably spent 10 or 15,000 total dollars on advertising, both pro and anti-Trump. That's all they found. But they wanted to keep eyes off of what they did, so they had to push it all off onto Trump. And that's why the FBI did what they did. That's why the special prosecutor, one of the reasons he was brought in was to keep this all going. Now, it's kind of like a magician, and I want you to think about this. Since Mueller's been in there a year and a half, guess what he has managed to do? He has managed to keep Clinton out of the news and for being prosecuted. He's been able to have access to wherever he wants. So all of the dirty, nasty stuff that went on, he's destroying proof as he goes. He's keeping everybody's attention off of what they did. And I've done numerous programs on all of the nastiness that's going on and that went on under the Obama administration and by Bill and Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, the DNC, Debbie What's-Her-Name Schultz, that whole cadre, Eric Holder, just that whole mafia. But it all started with the narrative that was started by Obama and perpetuated up through today on the Russian collusion. Everybody knows that there's no truth to it, but they keep perpetuating it. And because they've been so successful at it, they're keeping the real criminals out of the headlines and out of court and out of Congress and off of the newspaper pages. And that's the goal. Number 19. Another one of the things that Obama did on his way out the door. Now, remember, as I said, they all knew that Hillary was going to win in a landslide. After Trump won, Obama changed an internal function of how information was distributed. Classified information, and I'm going to kind of just do this in a thumbnail because frankly, I don't know who exactly got it. I knew at the time because it was in the paper, but I do not recall it now. But in effect, here's what he did. Confidential information would go to, say, 2 or 3 heads of departments. Okay. By executive order, he changed that. So now that information went to the head of every department in the government. Now think about that. Now you've got 50 people, 50 departments with 50 staffs. And inside each department, who knows how many people are looking at that when it comes in. So what he did in effect was he took the information that was supposed to be used between the president and 1 or 2 of key advisors and now made it common knowledge, so leaking became easy. Obama was not concerned, as he's going out the door, was not concerned about security. He was concerned about setting up the resistance and the deep state so that they could disrupt the Trump administration. That's the Obama legacy. We know for a fact, number 20, that he knew about the FISA warrant and he knew about the P file. That means, now think about what that means. That means that that Obama was in on the cover-up from the Steele dossier. I call it the P file. Remember, they went in July to get the FISA warrant to spy on Trump, and they didn't get it. They came back, and they had the P file plus some phony newspaper articles to get the FISA warrant. In order for the Justice Department to go get that FISA warrant, Obama knew it, and he was well in hand, and they have documents now that show that he knew about it. That means he was very well aware and involved in a cover-up and deception of the FISA court judge in order to spy on U.S. citizens. That's the Obama legacy. There were hundreds of requests by Debbie What's-Her-Name Schultz for unmasking and Donna Brazile. I believe that's who it was. Unmasking of U.S. citizen in the Trump campaign. Remember, when they are monitoring, which is allowed, they're allowed to monitor foreign dignitaries in this country. And when they get American people in those, they are not allowed to refer to them by name. All they can do is refer to them as U.S. citizen A, B, C, and D. Well, Obama wanted to spy on and get names and dates and information on people in the Trump administration. You are not allowed to do that. That is illegal. In order for that to be done, it had to be agreed on and signed off on by the president. Now, technically, the head of the Justice Department is the one that made those requests. But that had to be done with the permission and the sign off of Obama, which means Obama was involved in totally violating the rights of United States citizens in the name of getting Trump. That's the Obama legacy. One of the most disgusting things and humiliating things that I saw while he was president, and there's one, but I'm going to do another one, was when he went to the Middle East and met one of those stupid mullahs, the head of the religious sect over there. And if you ever look at that picture closely, the mullah doesn't even bother to get up and shake his hand. He just sits there like he's God. And Obama bends over and bows to this guy. It was absolutely disgusting. And while I'm on it, here's the second one. The first humiliating picture that I saw, because of the U.S. president and his weakness and lack of cojones, was U.S. Navy members kneeling with their hands tied behind their back on the front of their ship with Iranians holding them captives. And what did our president do? Not a thing. Can you imagine what would happen if they do that now? There would be total chaos in that country because Trump would bomb them back to the Stone Age. But that was the Obama legacy: weakness and subjugation to Middle East. And to go hand in hand with bowing down to the mullahs and letting our Navy men be humiliated by Iranian pirates, he snubbed Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu when he came to this country. He's our ally. He's supposed to be our friend. And Benjamin Netanyahu came here. He was invited here by Congress to speak to Congress about an issue that was coming before him, and I believe it was the Iran nuclear deal. And Obama didn't want to have anything to do with him. He didn't meet him at the airport. He didn't invite him to the White House. He didn't go listen to him speak. He didn't have a photo opportunity. He absolutely ignored him, and then went and worked actively against Netanyahu in Israel, in his own country, to get him thrown out of office. That's the legacy of Obama treating our allies that way. No wonder Israel was so happy that Trump got elected. I would be too. Another thing that he did, which was illegal, and it's going to be fought in the courts, was he created the current immigration crisis, the DACA kids, by executive order. And it's very plain in the Constitution. The president has sole authority over immigration in this country. Now, the liberals are going to fight every single step, every single move, just to tie it up long enough so that Trump gets out of office and then everything's going to die down. They think. But Obama, by executive order, allowed all of these kids, and when I say kids, that's a lie. There were some as old as 20 years old that were coming in. They were illegal. They brought their family with them. Now they say there's 800,000, but that's probably 800 of the DACA kids, 800,000 DACA kids, and each one of those kids were allowed to bring their parents in. And because of chain migration, the statistic is Mexicans, as a general rule, bring in 6 people per immigrant. So you can take that number of 800,000 and multiply that by 6. That would be 4.8 million. That was all created by Obama. The last one I want to talk about, I've already discussed it a little bit, but it was brought out this week that President Obama used the FBI to get counterintelligence investigation, not criminal, but counterintelligence against the American people and the Trump administration by embedding at least 2 spies that we know of in the Trump administration and using foreign nationals, foreigners, i.e. GPS and Steele, all to get Trump. This is all illegal. This is an abuse of power. And that's the Obama administration, a total abuse of power, corruption, illegality. That's the Obama administration. When you hear about the Obama legacy, people want to talk about, the press want to talk about Obamacare and what else do they want to talk about? What else are they calling his legacy? The immigration thing with the DACA kids. Anything else the mainstream media thinks is a good thing, gay marriage. Those are the things they talk about. They don't talk about the corruption. They don't talk about the illegal stuff he did. They don't talk about weaponizing every part of the U.S. government for his benefit. They don't talk about that. But that's all illegal. And some of it was treasonous, like the 20% uranium sold to Putin. That's treason. And it just hit me. I didn't say this earlier. We are not self-sufficient in uranium. Even with that 20%, we still have to import uranium from other places in the world to make our nuclear weapons. Now we're 20% less, and guess where we have to go buy it? We have to go buy what we were buying plus an additional 20%, and Putin has been buying it up around the world. So guess who we're going to end up buying our uranium for to make our nuclear weapons? Putin. And if he keeps buying, guess who he's going to shut off and not allow us to have uranium? If I controlled the uranium market in the world, I would not let Russia have it, and that's what Russia's going to do to us. And Clinton and Obama and his administration are guilty of putting us in that position, and that is treason. And that is the Obama legacy. Now, when I end one of these programs, and in case you weren't counting, that was 26 different items that I chose to pick to show the Obama legacy. That's the true Obama legacy that history will never write, because history is written by left-wing liberals. But here we will have, for my kids anyway, and hopefully it survives me, we will have the facts and what really happened because we lived through it. The true Obama legacy. Now, as I was getting ready to say, whenever I end these programs, I like to do current events, and so that we have an accurate record of what week things were done. And this first one is the Mueller investigations, and I touched on this as number 26 on our list. We talk about the whole Mueller investigation is set up on a pack of lies. The P file, and now think back to the people. There was Carter, was the first one, and he was illegally unmasked and illegally wiretapped. I mean, technically the wiretap was legal, but it was gotten with illegal means and then unmasked illegally by the Obama administration, and he was set up. Okay? Then came Papadopoulos, a young guy trying to be a big shot, and they used that to propel the Mueller investigation to go forward, and he was set up. We know Papadopoulos was the one that came out this week. We know he was set up by two FBI spies, and then Papadopoulos was taken out and gotten drunk by the Australian, again, another foreigner, and started bragging to the Australian Prime Minister, who came back to the FBI, and that gave him reason to go arrest Papadopoulos and make a big show out of it when it was all a big setup. And the Steele file, that was all set up, from the Democratic Party to the Clinton administration paying for it, to the attorneys that were involved that hired GPS, that hired Steele, that colluded with the Russians to get the information for the file that was brought back to the FBI, that was given to that McCain, who got it to the president. It was all a setup, and all in the name of getting Trump. Unbelievable. Oh, then there was Manafort, another one. The FBI hired to recruit Russian oligarch. When they had Manafort in the crosshairs, Manafort, in his past dealings, had screwed a Russian oligarch, and I couldn't pronounce his name. It had a lot of consonants in it, but and this oligarch right now is in the process of suing Paul Manafort. So the FBI went to this oligarch and said, "Hey, we can help you with your deal here, but we want you to come out and say that you and Manafort were working together in collusion." And the oligarch started, "Are you crazy? Not only would I not work with him, and not only was there no collusion, but I'm suing the guy. I don't like the guy. I mean, I'd like to see him fry, but I'm not going to lie and say that we were working together." That never happened. But that was done at the instigation of the FBI, trying to set this guy up to get him to say something against Trump. Again, all set up, all lies, all dirty tricks. Also this week, the date was set for the meeting with Kim Jong-un, and it's June 12th, supposedly. Now, every year at a certain time, the United States and South Korea have military games they play. They fly planes. It's generals who get to play with their toys with each other and share and show off. That's basically what those war things are. And every year they do this, and every year there's no problems. And every year Kim Jong-un or his dad before him would come out and say, "Oh my God, they're," and they did this for the benefit of their people and to prove to the world that they had a backbone. "Oh my God, the United States has got their Air Force here, their military, they're coming to get us. They're going to attack us, and they would always object, and they would always say that they're coming to get them, and nothing ever happens. And at the end of the games, North Korea looks like they had a backbone. United States finally leaves, and it's a game that they play. Well, this time, right on script, Kim Jong-un objects. Only this time he throws out the threat that if you don't get your military out of here, there will be no meeting, and we will not denuclearize. And Trump and his administration came out and said, well, we're going to plan like we're going to have one, and if you don't show up, then you don't show up. If you show up, good. If you don't show up, that's equally good. But that happened this week. And also this week, at the end of the week, we had the Santa Fe shooting in Santa Fe, Texas. Now, I find this extremely interesting, and here's why. If you go back a couple of months, I did a program where I referred to a guy by the name of, I can't think of his name. Doggone it. But anyway, this guy is a specialist in false flags and interpreting things. Now, he noticed things in these false flags, and he does speeches all around the country on them, and he proves them. He has predicted 12 false flags that have happened. Vegas was one. Now, at the time, he said, and this was a couple of months ago, he said there's going to be one, and he gave a date, and he said Dallas, Texas. So I reported it, and I said, if it happens, then we'll know it's true. If it doesn't happen, okay, then it didn't happen. And it doesn't get... So here we are, about a month and a half later. It didn't happen in Dallas, but it happened just outside of Houston. Okay? And it didn't happen on this month, but it happened a month and a half later. Now, first off, I want you to think about something. There are 50 states in this union, okay? What do you think the odds are of somebody being able to say, this thing is going to happen in this state? Just getting the state right, 1 out of 50. The next false flag will be, if he just said Texas. The odds are 1 in 50, right? Okay. And then you said it's going to happen on this month. You got a 1 in 12 shot, right? So he missed it by a month and a half. Now, one of the reasons he went public with that, and he says so in the video, is he wanted everybody to pay attention to Dallas on that month. And if everybody gathered around, perhaps they could stop it, because the people that were doing the false flag, the FBI, could not do it out in the open with cameras, everybody's cameras rolling. And we know that they did. We know that there were people in Dallas at that location at that date. We know that to be a fact. So what if the FBI said, oh, crud, we can't do that. Let's put it off. We'll plan it for another location. So they go down to Houston, and it takes them a month to get it together, and then they pull off the false flag down there. Ole Demigard was the guy's name, by the way. Now, there were some interesting things that happened with this false flag. Now, when I say false flag, I do not mean people were not hurt or killed. That's not what I mean. I mean, it was set and orchestrated by the federal government for a purpose. And most of them have been set up for the purpose of getting gun control or security for school systems. But here's some interesting things. Now, this supposedly was pulled off by a high school kid, okay? They found explosives. Now, you would expect a Molotov cocktail to be an explosive, and they found some of those. They found CO2. The CO2, even if you're an experienced guy that knows what you're doing with that, first off, it's hard to get. And secondly, you got to know what you're doing with that. And the FBI came out and said FBI explosive devices were found. Not that they just found CO2. So it's not like this kid just got a hold of some CO2. They want us to believe he got a hold of CO2 and made an explosive device and multiple Molotov cocktails, and the FBI said explosive devices were found around the school and in other locations, which means the house where he lived. On my Facebook page, there was a girl that came out and she said, okay, somebody needs to explain this to me. She said, she lives down there, by the way. She said the school sent out an email talking about a shooting 1 hour before it happened. And she said, somebody needs to explain this to me because this makes no sense at all to me. Well, it made perfect sense to me. I will bet you that in every false flag that has happened, there is always a drill done right before the actual event. And the reason they are done is so they can get actors into places, personnel into places, vehicles into places. Everything is a go and set to go, and they do it right before. So the school system was setting up their email, and it got out before it was supposed to. Within an hour, less than an hour after this thing happened, the FBI and the ATF were on site. How did the ATF know to be there? How did they know about the explosive devices? Let's say it's reported at 8 o'clock. The cops were there instantly. Okay, so the shooting starts, and the cops got there fast enough to arrest this guy. He got off 20 rounds. How did that happen? And then they search the school. That takes an hour or two. And they find explosive devices. They contact the ATF, and the ATF gets there. And this all happens in less than an hour. No way. Those people were on site. This is a false flag, without question. But it happened at the Santa Fe School District just outside of Houston this week. Well, that's all the current events, and that's the Obama legacy as we discussed it. Just one announcement I'd like to make. All of our programs are sponsored by the Prayer Box Ministry. And one of the things that I don't talk a lot about, but I'm very proud of, is all of our programs for the Right Wing Reverend are being streamed on iTunes. So if you're a member of iTunes, go over there to the iTunes section under podcast and look for the Right Wing Reverend. And we've been on there for a couple of years. There should be a ton of programs over there you can go through and listen to. Each one of them's less than a half hour, but they take Christian material, Bible material, political material, and I'll put them into a condensed program that hopefully is entertaining. Go over there and check us out. It's Right Wing Reverend Podcast on iTunes. Well, that's a program, everybody. You have a great week. I look forward to next week where we can sit down and talk about this week in politics. Goodbye.